Let us discuss one of the sociological concepts, that is diaspora. Diaspora means when the people living in their homeland, in their country, they have to move abroad and they have to settle there in order to earn a livelihood and in order to carry on with their lives. It is not very uncommon to hear how many Indians have settled abroad, and mainly, a lot of Punjabi who have settled in Canada, Toronto. So it is very common nowadays. Earlier, it wasn't that common that people used to just settle there or they used to just go there for studies, perhaps, but nowadays it is very common. Beginning with the introduction of diaspora, it is when the people ventured out of their homeland in large numbers. It was on the basis of a common origin, background, or beliefs. They continued to maintain a relationship with the motherland. They were de-territorialized and there was a transnational phenomena. That is, they were connected to their motherland. There were networks in the field of social, economic, religious, and political networks, but they were at the same time being transnational as well. Now, the point to notice here is when we talk about diaspora, it is involuntary in nature. The people are settled overseas and they live there and they also work there. Now, coming to the recent data by the Ministry of External Affairs, 1.36 crore Indians are living abroad and one-fourth of them especially are settled in UAE. Here's a picture that you can see. It's a graph of how the Indians are settled abroad in which countries. Now, when we trace back how this term came into being and what exactly happened, it can be on the basis of three types of literature. First is historical, second is diplomatic, that the statistics and data that we find, and the last one is anthropological, which focuses on the change or the giving away of cultural traits. Going by the historical literature, we can say that the Indians abroad were settled because of two reasons. First is the colonial reason, and the second is the nationalist reason. The people who favor the colonial perspective, they say that the Indians went abroad because of their economic compulsions. They got greedy and they were carried away by the desire to attain a lot of wealth. They started blaming their culture and their religion because of which they could not earn the kind of profit that they were hoping in their own homeland. The other perspective, the nationalist perspective, says that Indians did not go abroad because of their own wish. They were taken under certain arrangements which were done by the colonial domination. They were lured by colonial designs and they were serving those people to develop their own country. They say that Indians were not lazy. It wasn't that because they were lazy and they did not want to work hard. They did work hard and they were industrious, not lazy. It's just that they got lured by the colonial designs. Until recently, to study the Indians abroad, only functionalist orientation was used. But since the passage of time, with the passage of time, many other perspectives like socio-cultural perspective, political economic perspective, plural perspective, theoretical significance of the study, these kinds of different perspectives and theories have come into existence. The socio-cultural perspective is also known as the retentionist perspective. So what are we actually retaining here? We are retaining our culture. So the study is to understand the cultural identity and integration, where people have given away their cultural traits and their culture and tradition, or are they continuing with the same? So they recreate Indian social structure wherever they settle at. So the Indians, even when they move abroad, even when they settle there, they try to recreate the Indian social structure. Why? Because they try to hold on to their culture and they're inclined towards economic gain, not cultural assimilation, because they do not want to become a part of another culture, or they do not want to integrate these because they have shifted there for economic gain. They try to adhere to their traditional culture. It can be traditional food, traditional clothing, and the practices of Indian tradition and culture like endogamy, kinship, etc. This perspective advocates that the Indians settled abroad, they try to maintain ties with their homeland. How? It can be done in various ways, like spouse selection, choosing a spouse from their motherland, sending remittances at home, maintaining property in the motherland, and paying frequent visits. Now, when we talk about this perspective, we also ask, what is the role of culture abroad? Why are they holding on to it? So, culture acts as a defense mechanism against insecurity, because when it is a new place, they do not find a position for themselves, and that is where culture acts as a medium, acts as a mechanism for defense. As a compensation for loss of status, again at an alien place, at a new place, they try to find their status. Adhesive nature of Indian culture that we have studied in the process of socialization. They get a sense of belongingness also, that even if I'm abroad, I still belong to my country. They are not aware of the changes in the culture since they left. So if someone left the country, say about 30 years ago, there's a contrast in culture to the time, from the time that it was 30 years ago from today's time. So that person is not aware of it. Now, there is also a problem with this cultural identity. So, what is this? First is self identity. Whether they identify themselves as pan Indians, or are they more inclined towards narrow ethnic category? For example, do they identify themselves as Indians or as Punjabis, Biharis, Gujaratis? So, this is the first issue. The second is how others identify them. The people from that country, do they identify them as Indians or as Asians perhaps? The third issue is, does each generation stick to their roots? If not, then there is a case of intergenerational conflict, because the young generation today is not very much inclined towards adhering to the cultural norms of their country. The second perspective is the political economy perspective, which talks about how Indians were taken from their motherland as captive laborers, and this was the impact of colonialism or imperialism. This can be traced back in history, where the people were displaced because of their ethnic group. You know how the people survived on plantation as an occupation in those times in India. So they were taken as laborers and they used to work there. When they started working there, they became the subjects of racial discrimination and also exploitation. When we talk about political perspective, it is important to note that the powers of institutions and the power of state, that they have a autonomy and the power to influence the lives of immigrants living there. So these were the two perspectives that we discussed. We'll continue the theories in the next class. Let us discuss some questions now. Question number 1 is, which of the following is not a characteristic of diaspora? So if you look at option D, dispossession of collective memory. Dispossession, so here the option should have been retention, because you try to remember because you want to feel a sense of belongingness. So therefore answer would be option D. This is not a characteristic. Question number 2 is, the view that Indians have the ability to retain, reconstitute their cultural aspects in overseas setting discusses which perspective? So this was discussed in the perspective where we talked about retentionist perspective, where culture is still given value even when the Indians have settled abroad. So I hope you got the lecture. Thank you for watching.